She's vanished. But the silence says more than a confession ever could.
I believe that my husband is doing an incredible job for this nation. And I want that American people have a success. So whatever he will decide, I will support him.
But are you looking forward to it?
I'm enjoying it.
Maybe the real story isn't where Melania went, but it's what she's always known. She was well aware of the lies, hush money, cheating, and the things Donald did in front of her, or worse, behind her back, while she smiled for the cameras. She knew before the world did, and she married him anyway. But why? Why did she do that? Why is she still silent after all the drama? Well, Melania Trump has always been a mystery. A first lady who rarely smiled, a model who rarely spoke, and a wife who rarely flinched, no matter the headline.
Thursday night, you're going up the escalator? I'm going to be dating her in 10 years. Can you believe it?
This is the story of what Melania's always knew, and how that silence might be the loudest truth of all. Before the White House, scandals, and the silence that now surrounds her. There was a girl named Melania Knaus, born in a quiet industrial town called Sevnica in Slovenia. A place so far removed from the glamour and power she'd one day walk among, it almost doesn't feel real. She wasn't raised in wealth. Her father was a car dealer, and her mother stitched patterns in a local clothing factory. But even as a child, Melania wasn't like the others. She didn't just dream of pretty things, she understood their value. She knew how to present herself, how to control her image without ever saying a word. And that control would follow her for life. When she was 16, she started modeling, not in a flashy way, but in a calculated one. By 18, she dropped out of design school and went all in. And in 1996, she arrived in New York with her elegance, and that made people look twice. She wasn't begging for attention. She waited for it to come to her. There were whispers in the fashion world. She had a certain look, tall, sharp features, and reserved. But what stood out more than her face was her presence. And then came the turning point, when, in September 1998, she met Donald Trump at a Manhattan Fashion Week party. Melania had arrived in the United States just a couple of years earlier, in 1996. She was in her mid-20s, a Slovenian model trying to make it in New York. And that night at the party, one of those people was Donald Trump. He walked into the party with a date, but he didn't seem all that interested in the woman on his arm, because the moment he saw Melania, he zeroed in like a heat-seeking missile. He was twice her age, loud, brash, and unmistakably Donald. And when he asked for her number, she said no. It was not because she wasn't curious, but because she didn't want to be another name in his phone. Instead, she told him to give her his number. And he did. He gave multiple numbers as business, home, even Mar-a-Lago. That little game of push and pull caught her off guard, and it left her with all the power. From there, the two began something undefined. There were dates, photographers spotted them, but it wasn't a whirlwind romance, it was cautious. Melania kept her distance, never moved into Trump Tower, and always kept her own place. She seemed content letting him chase her. But just as things started to get serious, it cracked. There was a moment. Some say it was over a risque photo shoot he pushed her toward. She refused, and he pushed harder, so it made her walk away. Most women in that situation would be gone for good. But Melania was different. And Trump hated losing. After months of silence, he came back to her, without the flash or pressure. He actually apologized and promised he'd back off. That second chance, she took it, and this time she stayed. From then on, she became his steady presence. But even then, the warning signs were everywhere. Trump's world had already revealed its darkness long before Melania entered in his life. Back in 1989, a 28-year-old white jogger named Tricia Meili was brutally attacked in the Central Park 5. That same night, 5 teenage boys, Antron McCrae, Kevin Richardson, Yusuf Salam, Raymond Santana, and Corey Wise, were arrested. They were black and Latino, and just between 14 and 16 years old. There was no physical evidence, but Trump didn't wait for a trial. He paid $85,000 for full-page ads in 4 major newspapers titled as, "Bring back the death penalty. Bring back our police." In the ad, he demanded the return of capital punishment. He wrote, "I want to hate these muggers and murderers. They should be forced to suffer." He didn't name the boys, but the message was clear. The case gripped the nation. Fear, racism, and tabloid headlines did the rest. Years later, in 2002, DNA evidence proved the boys were innocent, and a man named Matias Reyes confessed. The boys spent years in prison for a crime they didn't commit. In the end, the city settled for $41 million. Trump never apologized. He never admitted he was wrong. Even decades later, he insisted, they admitted their guilt. For civil rights groups, it was more than a smear. It was a public attack on justice itself, a warning sign of what power could look like in the wrong hands. This was the man Melania was walking toward, and somewhere she already knew. Trump's life was a circus. Ex-wives in the tabloids, lawsuits circling him, and a Rolodex full of powerful, problematic men. And still, she chose him. Some say it was love. Others say it was calculation. But Melania didn't stumble into Trump's world blind. She knew who he was. She'd seen how he moved, how he bragged, and how exactly he treated people. So if she may have been quiet, she wasn't naive. By the early 2000s, they were the picture of a power couple. The paparazzi shots, red carpets, matching smirks. But insiders noticed something. Melania rarely spoke in public. When she did, it was brief and controlled. She never shared too much, never gave the press a headline. She was, in many ways, the opposite of everything around her. And that was what Trump liked most. He could be the spectacle, she could be the silence. Looking back, their first meeting almost reads like a movie script. A rich, loud man meets a mysterious foreign model. However, what came after was no fairy tale. It was built on tension, strategy, and an unspoken deal. She gave him loyalty, he gave her a platform. And together they built something that, for better or worse, would end up in the White House. But it all started in that single moment, September 1998, under dim lights, in a crowded Manhattan room, when she looked him straight in the eye and said no. So where was it all heading after that? Of course, straight to the altar. But was this going to be the fairy tale wedding she once imagined, or something far colder? A contract sealed in diamonds and silence? By 2004, Donald Trump was back in the spotlight, not just as a billionaire, but as the TV tycoon of The Apprentice. His brand was booming, and right next to him was Melania, now more visible than ever. Then came the proposal. He didn't get down on one knee to whisper anything sentimental. What he did do was hand her a 12-carat diamond ring and a prenup. Yeah, that was it. Their engagement was announced with flair, but behind the scenes, it was all business. Donald was firm about the terms of the prenup, and Melania reportedly didn't push back. The wedding came in January 2005 at the Palm Beach Mar-a-Lago. Hundreds of celebrities, billionaires, and politicians were there. Even Hillary and Bill Clinton sat among the guests. The press circled like vultures. It was everything Trump loved, the gold, glitter, and attention. Melania wore a Dior gown that weighed nearly 60 pounds. It took 1,000 hours to make. She smiled for the cameras, held his arm. It looked like a woman stepping into a fairy tale, but people watching closely noticed something else. This wasn't love on display. It was an image. That same year, she became a U.S. citizen. And shortly after, she gave birth to their son, Barron. Just like that, the deal, if that's what it was, seemed complete. She was now Melania Trump, a wife, mother, and citizen. But here's the twist. Despite the public perception, Melania wasn't playing the victim. If this was a transaction, she had her own terms too. She kept her space. And Donald, he bragged about their life, how she never nags and lets him do what he wants. It sounded more like a business arrangement than a marriage. But to them, maybe that was the marriage. And when Donald ran for president in 2015, people were sure she wouldn't last, that she'd finally walk away. But she didn't. So was it a love story or was it a strategy? Maybe it was both. Maybe it started as a flirtation, turned into a contract, and then hardened into something transactional. Because in a world where Donald Trump told everyone everything, Melania told them nothing. And somehow, that kept people watching. But the real show was still backstage. While the cameras followed the polished image, behind the scenes things were starting to rot. There were affairs, scandals, and payouts. Let's start with the most infamous Stormy Daniels, an adult film actress who claimed she had sex with Trump in 2006, just months after Melania gave birth to Barron. She said it happened at a celebrity golf tournament in Lake Tahoe. He told her not to worry about his wife, that they slept in separate rooms. And when the story almost broke during the 2016 campaign, there it goes, the hush money. Michael Cohen, Trump's lawyer, paid Daniels $130,000 to stay quiet. That payment eventually led to federal investigations, criminal charges, and courtrooms packed with press. But not a single public word from Melania. And that wasn't the only one. There was Karen McDougal, a former Playboy playmate, who said she had a 10-month-long affair with Trump in 2006 to 2007. She claimed he introduced her to his family, took her to the same places he once took Melania, and told her he loved her, even tried to pay her afterward. That one was also buried with a shady deal made through the National Enquirer to catch and kill the story. And yet again, of course, Melania said nothing. There were rumors too. The whispered names, a contestant from The Apprentice, a publicist, a waitress, even a rumored relationship with a campaign staffer during his early political days. Among the darkest rumors were the ones tied to the Miss Teen USA pageant, a contest where some participants were as young as 15. Multiple former contestants have come forward to say that Donald Trump walked into the dressing rooms unannounced while girls were changing, under the excuse that, as the pageant's owner, he had the right to inspect things. He literally bragged about it on a Howard Stern interview in 2005, saying, "I'll go backstage before a show and everyone's getting dressed. No men are anywhere, and I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant." One former contestant told CNN in 2016, "Our first introduction to him was when we were at the dress rehearsal and half naked changing into our opening dresses. He just came strolling right in." This wasn't a scandal hidden in the shadows. Trump publicly joked about it, even seemed to revel in the power imbalance. And these weren't adult contestants. These were teenage girls who were barely old enough to drive. There were no charges filed and investigations. Just disturbing stories told over and over again. And just like so many other moments, the world heard, reacted, then moved on. Yet Melania continued to stand beside him, appearing on stage at those same pageants, smiling. She knew this from the start. Everyone around them says so. The couple confirmed she was furious when the Daniels story broke, and she stayed in a separate hotel room during the inauguration. In 2018, during the peak of the Daniels scandal, she gave a rare interview and said, "I have more important things to think about and to do." She dismissed the media circus, deflected questions, and reinforced the one thing she always maintained. Her silence was her choice. But silence can speak volumes. Her icy stares, subtle hand swats, and refusal to walk side by side at times. Every small gesture was analyzed like a code. The red flags were impossible to miss. Trump's affairs weren't rumors anymore. They were headlines, legal cases, testimonies. Between them, Melania still stood in it all, stone-faced. And maybe that's what makes her so hard to understand. She wasn't the broken wife and the scheming partner. She was something in between, trying to survive and even winning on her own terms. As the world kept shouting for answers, she just smiled, posed for the camera, and gave them absolutely nothing. However, the silence wasn't empty. The shadows had already started to creep in. It was the year 2003, and Donald Trump, already dating Melania. He sent a handwritten birthday letter to Jeffrey Epstein, a man whispered about behind closed doors even then. The note was later discovered in Epstein's seized address book, along with Trump's multiple contact numbers. That same year, Epstein was already building his reputation as Manhattan's most powerful predator. A man who didn't just collect money, but people, actually, girls, especially young girls. It didn't matter if they were models, students, or runaways. All of them were just under Epstein's control. The parties kept happening on the private jets, sprawling estates, secret islands. The infamous Lolita Express, Epstein's private plane, became a name whispered in fear, then shouted in headlines. The flight logs revealed powerful men had boarded, and Trump's name appeared too. He claimed he only flew once, from Palm Beach to New York. But that one time was enough to raise eyebrows. Melania by then had been with Trump for roughly a year. She wasn't seen at Epstein's parties, but close enough to see the smoke. Stacey Williams, a former Victoria's Secret model, recalled Trump once inviting her to Epstein's mansion. She described that house as a nightmare. And then there was the Mar-a-Lago party in summer, 1992. A now infamous tape resurfaced decades later with Trump, Epstein, and 28 young women laughing and pointing, while women danced like decorations. Even one time, Trump slapped one woman's backside. Epstein just leaned in and they whispered, "Well, boys being boys, if the boys ran empires." But that wasn't the only tape that showed how Trump treated women. In October 2016, just weeks before the election, the world heard a different kind of confession. A hot mic left running on the Access Hollywood set captured Trump bragging about what fame let him do. "When you're a star, they let you do it. Grab them by the you can do anything." The tape went viral like a grenade tossed into the center of his campaign. The networks ran it uncensored. Voters were stunned, and members of his own party called on him to step down. It was vulgar and violent, and yet somehow, it wasn't enough to stop him. That same year, a woman under the name Katie Johnson alleged that Trump assaulted her at one of Epstein's parties in 1994. She was only 13 at that time. That case was dismissed, but the filing existed, and Melania would have seen it. The details were really horrific. She spoke of horrifying group abuse called orgy, where powerful men preyed on girls in the open. Her story never reached the courtroom, but it shook anyone who dared to listen. This wasn't ancient history. This was the man she stood beside on stage, holding his hand while he denied everything. The Epstein ties didn't vanish after his arrest. If anything, they got louder. Those conspiracy theories spread. The flight logs, photos, letters, all painted a blurry but damning picture. Trump tried to distance himself, saying, "I haven't spoken to him in years," but the note said otherwise. And Melania never clarified or asked the public to see it her way. The world kept waiting for Melania to break her silence. But what she gave them instead was something colder. In June 2018, she boarded a plane to a Texas detention center where immigrant children, some ripped from their parents, were being held. These centers were the result of the Trump administration policy. Families crossing the border were separated, and children, even toddlers, were taken from their parents. Some were held in makeshift and foil blankets. The news outlets released images of kids sobbing in corners, sleeping on mats under fluorescent light. It was a national crisis. Politicians, celebrities, and everyday Americans were demanding answers. So when the First Lady arrived, all eyes were on her, and her jacket made the headlines. On the back, in bold white paint, it read, "I really don't care, do you?" That wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. That day, the headlines exploded. Her spokesperson claimed to protect her that it's just a jacket, but the public didn't buy it. The phrase felt too pointed and too cruel. Was she talking about the children? About her husband's crisis and the media? No one knew for sure, and it made it worse. A White House official confirmed she chose the jacket herself and wore it again on the return. It wasn't a wardrobe problem. It was a message, but to whom? However soon, Melania told ABC News that the message was meant for the people and for the left-wing media who are criticizing me. She never mentioned the children. By then, the gap between the public and the real Melania was massive, which she didn't try to fix. Stephanie Winston Wolkoff was once Melania's closest friend and senior advisor, but in secret, she recorded their private conversations. And in 2020, those tapes exploded on CNN, NBC, The Guardian, and everywhere else. And she didn't even stop at the tapes. She turned their fallout into a book, Melania and Me. In the recordings, Melania sounds raw and furious about the media, her role, and about the image forced upon her. This wasn't the polished, robotic First Lady anymore. This was the real Melania. She was pissed, tired, and done with pretending. Still, the irony lingered. Just months before, she had launched her big initiative, Be Best, preaching online kindness and anti-bullying. But while she preached compassion, her husband was online attacking rivals, critics, journalists, anyone who crossed him. And then there was the moment the world couldn't forget, the time he mocked a disabled reporter on live television. During a 2015 rally, Trump flailed his arms and twisted his hands, impersonating Serge Kovaleski, a journalist with a physical disability. The gesture was exaggerated and disgusting. A crowd of thousands laughed. But across the country, millions were horrified. He performed the entire act on stage, broadcast to the world and preserved on camera forever, exposing the side of him that many recognized, but often chose to excuse, just as Melania did. It was dehumanizing. Parents pointed to it and used it as an example of what not to do for their kids. The disability advocates, teachers, journalists, even some of his own supporters winced at the sight of it. So when the people asked, how can she say this and stay with him, her response was really obvious, as they expected. I could say that I'm the most bullied person in the world. One of them, if you really see what people are saying about me. She said it straight, without blinking face, in a 2018 ABC interview, while reporters asked about children in cages and money scandals. And when Melania wanted distance, she didn't hide it. During the 2018 State of the Union address, just days after the Stormy Daniels news broke, Melania arrived separately from Trump. She entered alone, wore all white, and she didn't fake a smile. The reporters saw the signs. They noted how Melania started skipping events, how she vanished from the spotlight when things got ugly. It proved that the image was the message. After the presidency ended, something else began to fade. Melania Trump herself. She didn't return to New York, didn't take up charity work, and didn't try to rebuild a public image. Instead, she vanished. Since 2021, she's appeared in public only a handful of times. While Donald Trump launched rallies, battled indictments, and announced his 2024 run, Melania was mostly seen nowhere. There were whispers, loud ones, that they lived separately. She had renegotiated their marriage contract after the Stormy Daniels scandal, and now she had no interest in being First Lady ever again. She was living behind a thick wall of silence at Mar-a-Lago, raising their son Barron on her terms. And the rumors only grew when Melania skipped Donald Trump's 2024 campaign launch. The tabloids speculated if the marriage was over. Insiders say she made moves fast. Right after the Stormy Daniels mess, Melania locked in a better deal not just for herself, but for Barron too. Barron, after all, was always her priority. So when people thought, why isn't she by his side at court? Why doesn't she say something? They were missing the point. Melania had already played her hand. She appeared at Ivana Trump's funeral, attended a few high-profile events with Trump, and made sure her face was seen, but only when it mattered. Even after Trump's 2024 conviction in the hush money case, still nothing. Even in January 2024, when a second jury ordered Trump to pay $83.3 million to writer E. Jean Carroll for defaming her, Melania said nothing. The case was years in the making. Carroll accused Trump of sexually assaulting and her in a department store dressing room in the mid-1990s. When she went public in 2019, Trump denied it all. He claimed he never met her, said she was lying, and even sneered that she was not my type. That one sentence, not my type, became the start of another war. Carroll sued him for defamation. But in 2022, something changed. A new law in New York briefly opened the door for adult survivors of sexual abuse to file civil suits, even if the statute of limitations had passed. Carroll filed again, this time not just for defamation, but for the assault itself. In May 2023, a jury found Trump liable for sexually abusing her. They awarded her $5 million. Trump responded by doubling down on his attacks on Carroll, the jury, the judge, calling it all a hoax. That's what led to the second trial. This time the court wasn't just judging what Trump did in a dressing room. It was judging how he used his power to humiliate the woman who dared to speak out. Melania, who had stood beside him through Access Hollywood, Stormy Daniels, and through every scandal that made headlines, didn't even speak a single word. There were no statements, courtroom appearances of her, not even a sign of sympathy for the woman her husband was found guilty of abusing and defaming. No one really knows what is actually going on behind that perfect image. But that's the pattern. From the moment she met him, Melania played the long game of being calm, distant, and always 5 steps behind. Or ahead. And now she's right where she wants to be. All absent, untouchable, and still unbothered. So, what are your thoughts on Melania? Was she a quiet bystander, a strategic mastermind, or just playing the long game in the shadows? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And hey, if this story made you raise an eyebrow, click that like button, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe.